Of all the old lenses people suggest I try, this Olympus probably has the most vociferous support. Owners have written to tell me it's the best of all the mid-price fast 50s, better than the lenses I've been featuring in my videos. And there are plenty of user reviews of the lens online, with many photos to look at. I've read the reviews and I've seen the photos, and for what it's worth, my conclusion, before even trying the lens myself, is that the lens is, paradoxically, too good and at the same time not good enough. And this wasn't just my conclusion. A photographer friend who owns the lens and many other great lenses, and is someone whose judgment and photography I greatly respect, had come to the same conclusion when I talked to him about the lens. I'll explain what this conclusion means later in the video, but essentially I didn't see the need to buy a copy or add to the online reviews. That might have been the end of the story, until one day I visited our local camera shop and they had an Olympus 50 f1.4 for sale. Apparently 6 different versions of the lens were made between 1971 and 1984, with different body designs and coatings. The lens in the shop had one of the more recent serial numbers, over 1,100,000. According to some Olympus aficionados I've been following, lenses with these high serial numbers are the best ones to have, in terms of coatings, optics and performance. Now there are plenty of these lenses for sale online, but in my experience, the 1,100,000 plus serial number versions are quite rare. If you look through the lenses for sale, you'll also see that some of them suffer from fungus. It does seem that certain lenses are more prone to fungus than others, and this Olympus seems to be one of them. Or perhaps owners are less keen on taking these particular lenses apart and cleaning them. I don't know, I'm just making an observation here. Anyway, I had the chance to closely inspect the lens in the shop for fungus and other undesirable things, and it was clean and in excellent condition, so I decided to buy the lens. And here it is. For a fast 50 at f1.4, it's a rather cute little lens, a size and weight that suits a smallish mirrorless camera very well. I'm not surprised it's popular with Olympus 4/3 camera owners, or people who own Fuji or Sony crop sensor cameras for instance. The focus throw on my copy is nice and smooth. It feels very well made. I'm not so keen on the aperture ring. It has, how can I put it, a rather old-fashioned positioning at the front of the lens. It's good in the sense that you can easily see what f-stop you're using, but to me it's a little clunky compared to other good quality fast 50s. I was worried when I first held the lens that it wouldn't stop down easily on my gear, given you have to squeeze these levers to get the lens to stop down. But as soon as I put the lens on my OM to Sony E-mount adapter, the lens stopped down without the need to use these levers. The lens's optical design has 7 elements in 6 groups, with 8 aperture blades. It has a minimum focus distance of 0.45 meters. Reviews of the lens praise its sharpness stopped down, and the beautiful, smooth blurring of out-of-focus areas. Amongst a host of other film-era fast 50s, it gets high ratings for its clear rendering and colours, a fine walk-around and portrait lens. So what do I think? Well, I've been using the lens for some time now, and I broadly concur with these ratings. I took the lens on a family holiday to Spain, and it's a good performer. Here are some of the photos I took with the lens. Starting with some stop-down to wide-open comparisons. I took these while my daughters were playing tennis. Looking at wide-open shots, the bokeh, in the right conditions, is nice and smooth. I have to say that with the lens, the camera's auto-exposure sometimes struggle with bright areas wide open in the Spanish sun, on this tennis ball for example. Not just the tennis ball, but in other compositions, and I ended up with more overexposed images than I experienced with some other old lenses, so you may need to override the auto-exposures, especially wide open with this lens. The lens produces distinctive out-of-focus highlights and bokeh balls, something I'll return to later. I wouldn't say this is the sharpest fast 50 I've used wide open. The details in these stamen are not particularly well defined as you zoom in. And looking closely at this snail, the details are not razor sharp, but they're pretty good for an old lens wide open. Again wide open, you can see the lens produces a pronounced glow or ghosting to the lettering. But the good news is that there's not a lot of purple fringing in these images, compared to some other old lenses that have quite bad fringing in bright light situations. In terms of flares, the lens does flare if you point it directly into the sun, but that's to be expected. And for light striking the lens at an angle, a good deep hood helps of course. Stop down, the lens sharpens up very nicely. That's a good standard lens for walking around town, with good clean colours and a lot of details to enjoy. Here's a photo of a christening in Cartagena in Murcia, Spain, and outside a wedding, also in Cartagena. In these other shots, the lens has captured plenty of details right across the frame. For portraits, all I can say is that the lens is excellent, as long as you can nail the focus on your subject, which is true for all manual focus lenses. Finally, at night, the 8 blades produce very clean starbursts, as witnessed by this photo of a boat coming into harbour past a harbour light. In summary, I've enjoyed using the lens. I like its compact size, and when it all works well, I like the results. So let's return to the conclusion I reached before I tried the lens myself, that the lens is too good, but not good enough. What did I mean, and do I still think this is true? There's something that really used to irritate me when I was reading online reviews and ratings of old lenses. Occasionally, reviewers would write, "This is a 9 or 10 out of 10 lens, but I'm only giving it a 6 because it's not autofocus." Well, geez, of course it's not autofocus. It was made for manual focus film cameras. What do you expect? But actually, with the Olympus, I have some sympathy with this type of rating. When I look at my holiday snaps, I can see it's a very good lens, but there are times when I wish it had autofocus, or more accurately, I wished I was using an autofocus lens instead. That's because I was missing the focus on some scenes and portraits, photos that would have been great if they were in focus, but with manual focusing I'd missed the focus, and the images were essentially worthless. I had some perfectly good autofocus lenses with me, and quite frankly I wish I'd used those lenses instead. They render lovely, sharp and colourful images as well, and they'd have been in focus with my digital camera's excellent AF system. This brings us on to the perennial debate of the pros and cons of old vintage lenses versus modern digital lenses. Why use an old lens if you have a modern digital lens that, at least stopped down, performs just as well, or even better, with better coatings and accurate autofocusing, tracking and so on? For me, one of the pros of using old lenses are their character, where they deliver something special, or maybe exotic in terms of rendering, especially wide open, but also stopped down a bit as well. This begs the question, does the Olympus produce something special? Is it good enough to replace my modern digital lenses or other old fast 50s? The answer to that question is no. Its rendering is not special enough, or interesting enough, or eccentric enough, at least for my tastes. I thought long and hard about doing some side-by-side comparisons of the lens against other fast 50s. I had plenty to choose from, but I don't think that's fair or necessary. We'd be comparing different styles. For example, the Olympus against swirly lenses, or soap bubble bokeh lenses, or lesser coated lenses with a more washed-out watercolory look, or even slightly slower lenses that are actually sharper and better performers wide open. Personally, when I go on holiday, I prefer a couple of modern digital lenses for family snaps and walking around town, etc. Maybe a fisheye, and a couple of rather exotic fast 50s for wide open shots with more eccentric rendering. And the Olympus, good though it is, doesn't fit in that group. I took it on holiday this time to test it. There is one other characteristic of the Olympus that I'm not so enamoured with, and it's the way it renders out of focus highlights, most notably the cat's eyes, or ovals away from the centre. To me, and again this is entirely personal taste, I don't like them very much. They're not clean ovals, they're a sort of funny squash shape. Lenses that swirl also have squashed highlights. They make the blur and highlights look like it's swirling. With the Olympus there are no swirls. It's more like, how can I put it politely, an incoherent mess. And this is not helped by the fact that some of the bubbles are very clearly defined and some are very blurry. You could argue this is a consequence of the light and the composition of this specific image. However, here are some more images with bubbles, and as you can see, it's a similar story. Some of the bubbles are very distinctive, while others are incoherently blurry. I'd much prefer the out-of-focus highlights to be more consistent, either a veritable bubble bath, or softer out-of-focus rendering across all highlights. Another issue I have with the lens concerns the sawtooth shape of the blades when you stop down one stop to f2. For a lens of this supposed quality, I'd much prefer more rounded highlights when stopping down a little, and stopping down a little can be important to get some extra sharpness to the image. The sawtooth effect goes away pretty quickly for many images when you go from f2 to f2.8, but not always. If you watch the blades stopping down, you can see the sawtooth shapes are still there. I know some other old lenses have these shapes, but they're not ideal either. Looking at the quality of bokeh more generally, I think our own lenses can produce more attractive bokeh wide open. Take flower shots wide open for instance. I took two Carl Zeiss Jena pan colors on holiday, a 50mm f1.8 and an f2, and there's no doubt in my mind the pan colors produce more beautiful images. This doesn't mean I don't rate the lens wide open. I got some interesting wide open shots with the Olympus. I'm rather pleased with this one in particular. But if you look specifically at the rendering of the out-of-focus areas on the left, I'm not overly enamoured with the results. In contrast, the rendering of the background from this Zeiss Pancolor f2 is very special, in my opinion. My time with the Olympus produced many examples of how good the lens is. It really is a very good conventional standard old fast 50. I describe it as a safe pair of hands. If you want to buy just one old fast 50 and not take any risks, as long as it's clean and free from fungus, this could be a safe bet. You get sharp, colourful images and nice smooth bokeh wide open, and that's it. But it also reminded me of why I prefer autofocus lenses for family snaps, and why I'd rather use other, more eccentric lenses for artistic shots. The bottom line is that I don't really want high levels of perfection from my old manual fast 50s. I want more beautiful imperfections in all their glory, and there are other lenses that give me more of these beautiful imperfections. So will I keep this lens or sell it now I've had the opportunity of trying it out? I'll probably keep it and the OM adapter for now, as I may also try one of the Olympus f1.2 lenses at some point. But I have to say the Olympus f1.4 lens isn't anywhere near my top 10 of favourite fast 50s, especially if you include vintage and modern lenses from f1.2 to say f2, so it's unlikely to get much airtime on my camera. I know this lens has a lot of fans, and justifiably so, but for me personally it's simply too good to be an eccentric old lens. It doesn't have the imperfections that challenge me, frustrate me, and sometimes astound me, and it's not good enough to produce the magic that some of those eccentric lenses can produce, or handle those family situations where an autofocus lens is better. Anyway, I'll be very interested to read what you think about the lens and my conclusions. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, and until the next time, all the best.